Title: A Quiet Afternoon. Jordan Thompson just wanted a peaceful afternoon by the pool, but when two officers arrived questioning his right to be there, a vigilant neighbor hit record, and nothing in their community would ever be the same again. Sunday afternoons were sacred to Jordan, not because they were quiet or predictable, but because they were his. It was that small window of time after the rush of deadlines and before the work week hit again. He slipped on his flip-flops, grabbed his stainless steel thermos filled with iced chamomile tea, tucked his well-worn copy of The Invisible Man under his arm, and walked the short path from his townhouse to the pool. The air in Brookhaven, Georgia, had that late summer thickness, but the breeze made it bearable. Jordan loved the walk past the neatly trimmed hedges, past the same tired, no loud music sign, and past the patch of grass where neighborhood kids left their colorful water toys. He found a chair near the deep end and settled in. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. He read, sipped his tea, adjusted his sunglasses, and tried not to think about Monday. Then he noticed the black and white patrol car crawling past the gate, slowing down and backing up. Two officers stepped out, moving with that bored kind of purpose, as if they already knew who they were coming for. Jordan's shoulders tensed. He sat up straight, closing his book softly. "Good afternoon," the taller officer said, hand resting on his belt. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Jordan blinked. "I live here. Just enjoying the pool." "Can we see your ID?" the other officer asked, his pale skin and sharp features giving him an intimidating presence. Jordan reached into his bag. "Sure, I've got my key card too. Is there a problem?" "We got a call," said the taller officer, Officer Mark Reynolds. "Someone reported a suspicious individual hanging around the pool area." Jordan handed over his driver's license and community-issued key card. "Suspicious? How?" Reynolds didn't answer. Instead, he passed the card to his partner, Officer David Carter, who examined it like it was a rare artifact. Carter looked up. "You said you live here. Which unit?" "Unit 305. I bought it in April." "I've got my deed at home if you want to walk over," Jordan offered, trying to keep his tone calm. Carter raised an eyebrow. 305, huh? That's not usually the profile we see for that address. Jordan caught the tone he'd heard before, polite words carrying an accusation. He exhaled through his nose. "Look, officers, I'm not trying to make trouble. I'm just out here reading. That's it." Reynolds flipped through a little notepad. "You got any guests? Anyone else supposed to be meeting you here?" "No, just me." There was a pause, one of those long silences where nobody says what they're really thinking. From the second-floor balcony of the building across the courtyard, someone watched. Mia Johnson leaned slightly against the railing, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the record button. She knew Jordan. They weren't best friends, but they spoke often enough, mostly about their dogs, traffic on Main Street, and which coffee shop had the best pastries. She didn't like the way the officers were standing too close, too casual with their questioning. Carter handed the key card back slowly. "All right, just doing our job." But he didn't leave. He looked around as if still waiting for Jordan to mess up somehow. "You understand, right?" Reynolds added. "It's not about you. We just have to check when we get calls." Jordan stood up. "I understand you're here because someone thought I didn't belong." Nobody answered that, but down the street, another neighbor walked her golden retriever past the pool gate and barely glanced their way. Jordan didn't yell or raise his voice. He'd learned long ago that the louder he got, the less people listened. So he stayed measured, looking Officer Reynolds square in the eye. "Let me ask something. Did the callers say what I was doing that made them uncomfortable?" Reynolds scratched at his neck. "They just said there was a man they didn't recognize sitting by the pool. Looked like he didn't live here." Jordan pointed to his ID. "Because my name matches the address. Because I showed you my pool access card. And because I know how many parking spaces come with the unit." Reynolds shifted his weight. "Look, you seem like a reasonable guy. Let's just be clear, we're trying to verify your presence. That's it. No one's accusing you of anything." "But you are," Jordan said. "You just won't say it outright." That stung. Reynolds' mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Then from across the courtyard, another voice rang out. "He lives there." Everyone turned. Mia, now standing at the edge of her balcony, held up her phone. He lives here. That's Jordan Thompson, Unit 305. I see him walking his dog every morning at 7 o'clock. He's lived here since April. The two officers hesitated. Ma'am, please stay on your property, Carter called up. I am on my property, she snapped back. And I'm filming this because I've seen enough of these videos to know how they end. Jordan glanced up at her and gave the smallest nod of thanks. That moment, the neighbor, the camera, the exposure, it changed the energy. Reynolds' tone softened. All right, Mr. Thompson. I think we're good here. Appreciate your cooperation. But Jordan didn't answer. He sat back down in his chair, picked up his book, and stared at the open page without reading a word. The officers stood there for a few more awkward seconds before heading back toward their patrol car. As they pulled away, Jordan leaned back and closed his eyes, but his afternoon was already over as the sun pressed on. So did the questions burning at the edge of his patience. Mia stayed at her balcony rail longer than she meant to. She watched the patrol car drive slowly toward the exit gate, then paused, watching the officers speak through the cracked window before finally rolling out of sight. It took a minute before the sound of tires over the gravel faded entirely. Only then did she lower her phone inside. Her daughter, Lily, peeked around the doorway. Why were you filming them? Mia turned, still holding her phone like it was fragile. Because things like that don't always end well, and if something had happened, I wasn't going to be the neighbor who just didn't see anything. Lily frowned. But nothing happened, right? Mia paused. That doesn't mean it was okay. Down by the pool, Jordan sat still. No phone, no music, just him and the book he was no longer reading. From up high, he looked small in the sun's glare, like a man forced to perform calmness just to keep the peace. She'd seen him plenty of times, walking his goofy rescue dog, Max, grabbing his mail in slippers, sometimes chatting with Mr. Adams from the end unit about lawn care like two retirees. The man had a routine, he fit in, but today he'd been marked. Mia scrolled back through the video she'd taken. There wasn't much sound, but the visual told enough. Jordan standing stiff, arms controlled. The two officers hovering close, one writing, the other crowding him. The kind of scene that didn't need volume to explain itself. She tapped save and backed it up to the cloud just in case. Meanwhile, Jordan was still at the pool, but he wasn't relaxing. He stared at the same sentence in his book for several minutes before finally shutting it and packing up his things. His muscles ached in a strange way, not from exertion but from holding in too much. He wasn't angry, exactly, not yet. What he felt was more like that slow burn when your dignity is poked too many times in too short a span, like someone tapping your head again and again until it stops being annoying and becomes a kind of violence. That he walked back toward his unit, avoiding eye contact with the couple chatting by the tennis courts. They'd definitely seen the cops but didn't say a word. Inside, the air conditioning kicked on with a soft click. He set down his bag and went to the kitchen, poured what was left of his iced tea over the sink, and just stood there, quiet. After a moment, he pulled out his phone. 2 messages from his sister, Lisa Thompson, asking how the pool was, and 1 missed call from a number he didn't recognize. Probably the HOA again. He ignored both. Then the knock came, not a pounding, just 3 taps, polite but sharp. He checked the peephole. It was Mia. That he hesitated, then opened the door. She didn't wait for him to speak. I recorded everything. I figured you might want it. Jordan blinked, unsure for a second. Seriously? Yeah, she said, handing him her phone. I thought they were pushing too hard. You didn't do anything and they wouldn't let it go. It didn't sit right. He played the video, watching himself stand there, uncomfortable but composed. Watched the officer's body language, watched how close they got. When it ended, he looked up. Thank you. Really? Mia shrugged. You shouldn't need someone watching you just to be treated like a neighbor. There was a pause between them, then she added, if you ever need someone to back you up with the HOA or file a report or anything, I'm here. Jordan looked at her, really looked, and gave a slow nod. I appreciate that. He didn't say much else, not then, but the gesture planted something in him, something that had been buried under layers of tolerance and resignation. Mia walked back toward her unit, and Jordan stood at his door for a few extra seconds, holding her phone like it weighed more than it should. But just because the moment passed didn't mean he was ready to let it go. Jordan didn't sleep much that night. He lay in bed with his eyes open, arms folded behind his head, listening to the slow tick of the wall clock he hated but hadn't replaced. The house was still, no traffic, no neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls, just silence and the echo of the day playing on repeat. He kept seeing Carter's face, that slow lean in, the tone of his voice, the way he'd looked at Jordan like he wasn't a homeowner or a resident or a professional man who designed software for a living, but just some intruder near water. But what bothered Jordan more was that he'd seen it coming. The truth is, the signs had been piling up since he closed on the townhouse. He just didn't want to admit it, like the email from the HOA a few weeks in, reminding all residents to please avoid propping open shared gates for guests. It landed in his inbox the day after he held the gate open for a delivery driver and was spotted by Mr. Irwin, who didn't even say hello. Or the way some neighbors pulled their kids a little closer when Jordan walked by with Max, his sweet, clumsy rescue dog who was more likely to chase butterflies than people. He'd caught one dad subtly recording him on his phone as he waited outside the leasing office for a package. And the trash bin thing, that one stung. Every Thursday, the HOA sent notices about improperly stored trash cans. After 3 of them, each time when Jordan's bin had been tucked neatly against the wall, he knocked on the office door and asked to see the photo evidence. The manager fumbled through a binder and showed him a grainy picture of someone else's unit. Completely different number. No apology, just, we'll update the file. It was all small, maybe harmless if you looked at it in isolation, but not when it kept happening. He got up from bed and opened his laptop. The glow stung his eyes, but he didn't care. He started organizing files, sorting screenshots, HOA emails, photos of his clean patio after bogus complaints, that text from the landscaping crew who once told him they were asked to double-check his side yard, even though no one else had been questioned. He clicked open a folder labeled Pool Incident and transferred Mia's video to it. Then he created a second folder, Pattern. This wasn't about one afternoon, it hadn't been for a while. Around 2 a.m., Lisa came home from her nursing shift. She found her brother at the kitchen table typing. "You're up late," she said. Jordan didn't look up. "Couldn't sleep." She stepped closer and saw the open video on the screen. "Oh," she said softly. "It happened again." He nodded. She leaned on the counter and folded her arms. "This one worse than the trash notices?" He let out a half-laugh. "2 officers showed up today, said I looked suspicious sitting by the pool. Didn't believe I lived here. Pressed me for ID, asked to come into the unit." Lisa closed her eyes and muttered, "God. Mia recorded it." "Good," Jordan said. She sat across from him. "So what now?" Jordan paused. "I don't know. I've got everything documented, but it's like you stack it all up and still wonder if it's worth pushing back. If you say something, people accuse you of stirring the pot. If you stay quiet, they get to write the story for you." Lisa reached across the table and touched his hand. "You already know the answer." Jordan looked at her. "Yeah, I do." But he also knew that telling the truth didn't always guarantee people would listen. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Jordan stood in front of the mirror, toothbrush hanging from one side of his mouth, his eyes locked on his own reflection like he was trying to decide if he even recognized the man looking back. Not because of how he looked, but because of how tired he felt, not just physically, but somewhere deeper that he showered, dressed, made coffee, went through the motions, but when he reached for his keys and glanced at the pool bag near the door, he stopped. He used to love that walk, that little stretch between his door and the lounge chairs. It was peace. Now it felt like walking through a metal detector, knowing he had nothing on him but still bracing for the alarm that he left the bag where it was. Instead, Jordan took Max out for a long walk through the back trail near the wooded area that bordered the neighborhood. Less eyes, less pressure. Max bounced like usual, sniffing at every tree root, stopping to inspect empty snack wrappers as if they were clues in a mystery. Jordan let him lead, let himself breathe, but as they rounded the corner back toward the community, he noticed something strange. People were looking at him differently, not all, but enough. Mrs. Carson, who usually waved while watering her porch plants, turned away before their eyes could meet. The couple in Unit 207, who often smiled when he passed with Max, kept their heads down. Word had gotten out. Mia's video had started making rounds in the HOA's private Facebook group. Someone leaked it to a local advocacy page. By 10 a.m., it had already been shared more than 300 times. Jordan hadn't posted anything himself. He hadn't written a statement or tweeted his story, but the video spoke louder than anything he could have said. When he returned home, he found 2 letters slipped under the door. One was from the HOA. We are aware of a recent incident involving law enforcement and a resident. Please remember to treat our community members with respect and kindness. It felt hollow cold. The second envelope had no return address. Inside was a note written in tight block letters. Don't bring attention to yourself. We all just want to live in peace. Jordan stared at the paper for a long time before folding it twice and tossing it into the trash. He wasn't surprised, not anymore. That afternoon, he called Mia. Hey, she answered quickly. I figured I might hear from you. I saw the post. Jordan said, I didn't expect it to move like that. She sighed. It wasn't me. I sent it to a friend who works with the community justice group in Decatur. She asked if she could share it anonymously. Said yes. Maybe I should have asked you first. No, Jordan said. You did the right thing. There was a pause. You okay? She asked that he hesitated, then told the truth. Not really. She lowered her voice. You shouldn't have to carry this by yourself. He appreciated that more than he could say, but part of him had learned not to lean too hard on people. Too many times, concern turned to silence the moment things got inconvenient. That evening, Jordan sat on his balcony with Max curled at his feet, watching the sky turn from pink to gray. He thought about his father, about the time they were stopped in Fayetteville for matching a description, and how his dad had stood straight, calm, respectful, even though he was scared out of his mind. You don't get to mess up, he told Jordan later. You mess up, you give them a reason. You give them a reason, they'll write your story without you. Now, decades later, Jordan could still feel the weight of that warning. He didn't want trouble, but trouble always seemed to find him when all he wanted was peace. But maybe this time, he had a reason to write the story himself to be why the next morning, Jordan had made up his mind. He poured himself a coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened his laptop again. The files he had organized 2 nights before were still there, each labeled, time-stamped, cataloged like evidence in a courtroom. He clicked on the folder marked Pattern and stared at the growing list, screenshots, emails, even a photo he'd snapped 2 months earlier of a handwritten note on his windshield that read, "Keep the volume down. People have jobs." That had been after a Sunday afternoon when he'd played jazz on his Bluetooth speaker for exactly 12 minutes that he opened a new email. Subject: Formal complaint regarding incident on August 13, 2025. He didn't write it like someone angry. He wrote it like someone tired of not being believed. He kept it factual: time, place, officers' names, explained the exchange at the pool, attached a link to the video Mia had filmed, included the other neighbor, Mr. Adams, who later texted him that he'd heard the whole thing from his patio and would vouch for Jordan if needed. When he finished, he read the whole thing 3 times before hitting send. And when he did, he didn't feel relief. He felt like he'd just lit a match in a room full of paper, but a few hours later, his phone buzzed, unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. Then another call came, this one from a contact he recognized, Tasha Miller, an old college friend who now worked in community advocacy and legal support in DeKalb County. He picked up. "I saw the video," she said. "Didn't even realize it was you at first." "You good?" Jordan asked. "I'm all right," she said. "Well, as all right as you can be when someone calls the cops because you dared to relax." "You filing a complaint?" "Already did." "Want some backup?" Jordan leaned back in his chair. "What kind of backup?" "Well," she said, "we can start with pressure. Media doesn't always listen, but if we get a few more voices around you, things might start moving. Not everyone cares about one guy being harassed, but people care about policy." He hesitated. "I'm not trying to be some kind of headline." "I get that," she said. "But this isn't just about you. You know how many people this happens to who don't have a video? Don't have a Mia on the balcony?" He didn't answer. Tasha added, "You already started the fire, might as well make it count." He agreed to meet her the next day. That evening, he and Lisa sat on the patio with takeout containers and quiet music playing from her phone. The air was warm but pleasant. For the first time all day, things felt halfway normal. Lisa looked up from her noodles. "You talked to anyone?" "Yeah, Tasha. She wants to help with the complaint." Lisa nodded, chewing slowly. "I think that's smart. I don't want to make it bigger than it is." "Too late," she said. "It's already bigger. You didn't make it that way, they did." Jordan sipped his water. "You ever get tired of this conversation?" "Every time," she said. "And yet here we are." He looked out over the dark courtyard. A few porch lights were on. Somewhere, a dog barked faintly. He wondered if those same neighbors who watched silently yesterday would speak up if they had to. He wasn't counting on it. The next morning, Mia stopped him near the mailbox. "I got a letter," she said. That he raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "Hoa. A warning me about inappropriate conduct and unauthorized video sharing." Jordan blinked. "You serious?" She said. "It's dressed up nice, but that's what it says." "Did you do anything unauthorized?" "Nope," she said. "I filmed from my own balcony. Didn't break any rule. But you know how this works, they want people quiet." He stared at the letter in her hands, the thin veil of professionalism trying to cover a message that was crystal clear. "Sit down. Don't make waves." "You gonna fight it?" he asked. "Already did," she said. "Forwarded it to my lawyer cousin. She's better with words than I am." Jordan smiled. "I like your style." Mia tilted her head. "This place might look polished, but it's still got cracks." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, and now those cracks are showing. But once cracks appear, you either patch them or they spread." By Wednesday morning, Jordan's story wasn't just bouncing around local group chats anymore. It had hit the Brookhaven Journal, a mid-size Atlanta area news blog known for picking up community justice stories that the big stations ignored. The headline read, "Man harassed by police while sitting at his own pool, neighbor's video tells a different story." The article quoted parts of the formal complaint, mentioned the HOA's tepid response, and even linked the full video. Within hours, more people began chiming in. Some comments were thoughtful, supportive, others not so much. Jordan didn't even have to open the article to feel the heat. At the grocery store, someone recognized him. "Are you the pool guy?" they asked. He gave a tired smile and kept walking. At the dog park, a younger woman nodded once, like they were in on the same secret. A barista at his usual coffee stop slipped him a note with his order, "Keep standing tall." But back in his neighborhood, it was complicated. Support came quietly. A woman named Inez Shipley, who lived on the HOA board and rarely said more than hello, stopped him outside the mailroom. "I just wanted to say I watched that video, and I'm sorry. This place has problems, always has." He appreciated that, even if it was whispered. But the real tension was online. The neighborhood's private Facebook group had turned into a war zone. Comments flew. He could have just shown his ID and moved on. Why make it a big deal? Why are we attacking our officers for doing their job? If it were me sitting out there, no one would have called the cops. Wonder why that is. This community has always been welcoming. Don't let outsiders twist that. It wasn't just words on a screen, it was exposure. Jordan read a few threads, then stopped the moment people started debating whether he seemed aggressive. He realized what he was up against wasn't logic, it was comfort, people defending the world as they saw it, not as it really was. Meanwhile, Tasha moved fast. She connected him with a civil rights attorney in Roswell who had experience handling local government complaints. Together, they drafted a second, more detailed letter to the Brookhaven Police Department's Office of Internal Affairs. It included not just Mia's footage but a written statement from Mr. Adams and screenshots of the HOA's attempts to silence both him and Mia. 2 days later, the city issued a formal notice. Both Officer Mark Reynolds and Corporal David Carter had been placed on administrative leave pending review. The language was careful, routine procedure, non-punitive. Community trust matters deeply to us. But the message was clear, pressure worked. Jordan stared at the announcement on his screen for a long time. He didn't cheer, he didn't pump his fist or call anyone. He just sat there in his living room with the blinds half closed, Max snoring on the floor, and thought about how quickly things had shifted from sipping tea at the pool to being the face of something he never asked to represent. Later that day, he got a knock on his door, not Mia, not the mailman. It was a local news reporter, Rowan Yates, holding a mic and flanked by a quiet cameraman. "Mr. Thompson," Rowan said gently, "we were hoping to ask a few questions about what happened over the weekend." Jordan hesitated. "Why?" Rowan gestured slightly. "Because a lot of people saw that video, and I think they're waiting for you to say something." Jordan looked down, then back up. "I already said what I needed to in the complaint." "I understand," Rowan said, "but sometimes stories come across differently when you hear the voice behind them." Jordan didn't invite them in, but he didn't shut the door either. He stepped outside, arms folded. "Fine. You want a quote? I'll give you one." Rowan lifted the mic. "Go ahead." "I was just trying to relax," Jordan said, steady, "but someone decided I didn't look like I belonged. And instead of asking me, they called the cops. The cops didn't ask either, they assumed. That's what this is about, assumptions. It's about how quick people are to protect their comfort and how slow they are to protect someone's dignity." Rowan lowered the mic, visibly moved. "Thank you." "No problem," Jordan said. "Just do something useful with it." But once your story is out in the open, you can't always control where it goes next. The interview aired that same night on Channel 12. A short segment, barely 3 minutes long, but it ran during prime time, right after a story about rising gas prices and before a segment on the county fair. Still, it struck a nerve to be why the next morning, Jordan's inbox had nearly 30 new messages, some from strangers thanking him for speaking out, a few from old classmates he hadn't heard from in years, one from a woman named Loretta Pugh that read simply, "They did that to my nephew last year. He's still afraid to walk alone at night. Thank you for not letting this slide." But there were others too, messages that felt colder, warnings masked as advice. Careful what battles you pick. Communities have long memories. Some of us just want things to go back to normal. Jordan read them all, deleted none. The HOA, for its part, finally sent out a community-wide bulletin. It didn't mention names but referenced an incident involving residents and law enforcement and promised to review existing bias and safety protocols. It was vague and corporate, written to say something without really saying anything at all. Then came the meeting notice. Emergency HOA Assembly, Saturday, 10 a.m., Clubhouse Lounge. Jordan stared at the flyer taped to his door like it was a summons. He didn't want to go, but not showing up felt worse. Saturday morning came faster than expected. He threw on a clean polo, pressed jeans, and showed up early. The Clubhouse Lounge was already buzzing, not with excitement, but with a kind of strained tension. Chairs were pulled into circles, coffee cups in hand, fake smiles, everyone pretending they weren't there to see a storm hit the room. Mia waved him over. She wore a denim jacket over a sundress and had the video queued up on her phone, just in case anyone tried to challenge what happened. Mr. Adams sat near the front, arms crossed. A few others Jordan didn't recognize from deeper in the complex gave him a silent nod. It was the first time he realized just how many people had been watching, quietly maybe, but watching all the same. The HOA board sat in a row behind a fold-out table. Inez Shipley, who'd quietly apologized days earlier, sat at the end with a notepad in her lap. Beside her was Trevor Lang, the HOA president, a 50-something man who often dressed like he was one boat away from retirement. Today, he looked like he hadn't slept. He tapped the mic once and cleared his throat. "Good morning. Thanks to everyone for coming on such short notice. I'll keep this brief." Someone in the back coughed loud enough to interrupt. A few chuckles followed. Trevor continued, "We've all seen the video, and I want to start by saying we hear the concerns. No resident should feel unsafe or unwelcome in their own home." Jordan leaned forward slightly, waiting for the but. Trevor went on, "We recognize that some of our policies and assumptions may not reflect the kind of inclusive environment we want this neighborhood to be known for." It wasn't much, but it was something. Then Mia stood up. Are you going to issue a formal apology to Mr. Thompson? Trevor looked around nervously. We're reviewing all the steps that led to the incident. That's not an apology, she said flatly. More murmurs followed. Jordan didn't expect her to do that, but he was grateful. Then Inez raised her hand. I'd like to suggest that we form a community panel to revise the neighborhood watch protocols and improve training around bias. That got some nods. And then a surprise. A woman stood from the far right corner of the room. Beatrice Rowan, a retired teacher who had lived in the community since it was built in 1997. I remember when the Jeffersons moved in across from me, she said, voice strong. People said the same things back then, that they didn't belong, that things were going to change. And guess what? They did, for the better. We're not going backward. A few people clapped, tentative but real. Jordan took a deep breath, then he stood. I didn't ask for any of this. I was just trying to enjoy my weekend. I'm not here to shame anyone, but I do expect to be treated like a neighbor, not a question mark. No one interrupted. I hope we're not just here to talk, he added, because I've got better things to do than relive the same moment every black man I know has lived 10 times already. And with that, he sat back down. But even as the room exhaled, everyone knew this wasn't the end. It was just the part where people finally had to decide which side they were on. The days after the HOA meeting felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just more honest. People looked at Jordan now, not through him. Some waved, some didn't, but the pretending was gone. There was no mistaken identity to fall back on, no vague excuses about community safety. The air carried a subtle charge, like the neighborhood was waiting to see what came next. On Tuesday, Jordan got a call from the Brookhaven Police Department's Office of Internal Affairs. A calm, rehearsed voice informed him that both officers Reynolds and Carter had been placed on leave while the investigation continued. We'd also like to schedule a follow-up interview with you, the voice said, to walk through your statement, clarify the sequence of events, and ensure your account aligns with our preliminary findings. Fine, Jordan said. But bring a notepad. I'm not guessing my way through it. That same evening, he met with Tasha again, this time at her office downtown. A small converted bungalow with posters of past civil rights marches lining the walls and a Keurig that never quite worked right. You made the right kind of noise, she told him. I didn't want to be anyone's symbol. You're not, she said. But symbols aren't chosen. They happen when truth collides with exposure. Jordan looked at her desk. There were folders with other names, cases that didn't get shared, voices that never made it out of voicemail inboxes. Does this ever exhaust you? He asked. Tasha smiled. Every day. But I rest when I win. Outside, storm clouds gathered, thick, humid clouds that held the weight of August rain. Jordan stepped onto the porch and let the wind hit his face. For a brief second, he didn't feel like someone being watched, questioned, or measured. He just felt like a man on a porch watching a storm roll in. That weekend, the community panel met for the first time. It wasn't some dramatic, sweeping event. No cameras, no speeches, just 10 residents in folding chairs in the clubhouse, going line by line through the neighborhood watch policy. Mia was there, so was Inez. Even Beatrice Rowan brought cookies like it was a book club. Jordan almost laughed when she passed him one without saying a word, just a soft pat on the shoulder before sitting down. They discussed everything, from security camera blind spots to the language used in HOA complaint forms. Someone pointed out that the default resident description was always unfamiliar individual. Mia raised her hand and said, "Yeah, and that's code for someone who doesn't look like you expect." Nobody argued. There was still resistance from some corners of the neighborhood. Some residents didn't attend the meetings. A few left passive-aggressive comments on the community forum. One even started a rumor that Jordan was trying to sue the HOA, which wasn't true but also wasn't far from something they feared. But Jordan wasn't chasing lawsuits. He was chasing truth and clarity and the simple expectation that he could live where he lived without justifying his presence every time he stepped outside. On Sunday morning, a week after the meeting, he sat by the pool again. Same chair, same thermos, same book. But this time, no one called the police. Instead, a boy from 2 units down waved at him. Max, snoozing under the umbrella, lifted one ear and then drifted back off. Lisa joined him later with coffee and her scrubs still on from the night shift. She sat beside him, eyes half shut behind sunglasses. "Looks peaceful," she said. "For now," Jordan replied. She sipped her drink. "You change things." "Maybe a little." "Still counts." He glanced around. No tension in the air, no patrol cars creeping by, just two siblings sharing a quiet morning the way it should have always been. A few minutes later, Inez walked by, nodded to them both, and said, "Working on those updates. Should have new drafts by next week." Jordan smiled politely. "Appreciate it." It wasn't over, it might never be over. But something shifted, not in a viral way, not in a press conference kind of way, in a real way. In a way that made someone like Beatrice Rowan stand up and speak. In a way that made a neighbor like Mia hold her phone steady instead of turning away. In a way that made a man like Jordan feel like maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to explain his own presence ever again. But awareness means nothing if it doesn't lead to action. And now, action had started. It was nearly a month later when Jordan got the letter. It came in a plain white envelope addressed by hand. No fancy header, no city seal, just a stamped return address from the Brookhaven Police Department. He read it twice. The internal investigation had concluded. Officer Mark Reynolds had received a formal reprimand for failure to de-escalate. Corporal David Carter was placed on extended unpaid leave with mandatory retraining. Neither would face criminal charges. It wasn't justice, not in the way people talk about it online, where stories always seem to end with resignations, lawsuits, or neatly wrapped closure. But it was something. Jordan folded the letter, slipped it into a drawer beside the sink, and stood there for a long while, not happy, not angry, just breathing. Later that afternoon, he ran into Mr. Adams near the mailboxes. "They let the younger one off easy," Adams said, frowning. Jordan nodded. "Yeah, but they didn't pretend it didn't happen. That's new." Adams glanced around. "Used to be folks like us couldn't even get a meeting." "Well, we've got one now," Jordan said. "Let's see what we do with it." As summer turned to early fall, things around the neighborhood shifted, not overnight, not dramatically, but enough. The community panel kept meeting. They rewrote the reporting process so that anonymous calls couldn't trigger automatic law enforcement dispatches without visual confirmation. They added a line to the HOA bylaws that explicitly banned racial profiling under the guise of security concerns. New language, small changes, big meaning. More residents began showing up to those weekend meetings, not just to talk, but to listen. One evening, a mother from the north side of the complex stood up and said, "I used to be one of those people. I'd see someone I didn't recognize, and I'd tense up. But I never asked why that was. I just assumed my discomfort meant danger. I'm sorry for that." Jordan sat across from her. He didn't clap, he didn't nod, but he heard her. That was enough for now. Tessa stayed involved. She joined the newsletter team, started organizing monthly block socials, and made it a point to welcome new residents herself. People trusted her in a way they didn't always trust board members. Maybe because she had actually done something when it counted. Jordan, for his part, stayed quieter. He didn't want a spotlight, he never had. But he did start writing again. Not reports or complaints, journals, stories, reflections. He wrote about what it felt like to be seen only when others felt suspicious. He wrote about Max's goofy grin and how a dog could sense tension in a room before anyone said a word. He wrote about his dad, about that stop in Fayetteville, and about the invisible line that black men are always told not to cross but never shown exactly where it is. One of those reflections ended up in a small Atlanta-based magazine, just 900 words. Tasha had submitted it on his behalf. It was called The Chair by the Pool. People reached out quietly, gratefully. The magazine sent him a check, small, symbolic, but Jordan never cashed it. He pinned it to his fridge as a reminder. One Saturday, as he walked Max past the clubhouse, a new family was moving in, a young couple with 2 kids. The dad looked up, saw Jordan, and offered a smile. "You from around here?" "Yeah," Jordan said. "Right over in 305. The man nodded. "Just moved in. I'm Nathan. This is my wife, Callie." "Welcome," Jordan said. "You picked a good spot." Later, he thought about that brief exchange, simple, uneventful. No hesitation, no stares, just neighbors. That's what change looked like. He figured, not fireworks, not headlines, just normal moments that no longer felt like walking a tightrope. He got home, let Max off the leash, and stood for a second looking out his sliding glass door. Same view, but it felt different because he wasn't just existing there anymore. He belonged, not because he proved anything, not because he won a case or delivered a speech or carried anyone's expectations, because he always did. Now, finally, other people could see it too. Stories like this aren't about heroes, they're about truth. And the truth is, we all have a role to play in what kind of world we choose to live in. If this story made you feel something, share it. And if you're not already subscribed, hit that button. Let's keep the conversations going because this isn't just Jordan's story, it belongs to all of us.